lecture is all about what government can do at their bare minimum. The lectures for what I'm going to be giving, they are asynchronous from the book, meaning that the first three things I talk about are different in order than the first three things, but they are the same. They're the same topics. They're just in a different order. Okay, so by watching the lectures, you will still be prepared for the test. I just wanted to make sure that no one was confused by reading the book. I didn't want anyone to be caught off guard when they read the book and they realize that I'm outlining things in a different order than the way that the book is outlining things. And I'm doing this because I feel like this is a easier way to outline things, as I feel like the scaffolding is better in the way that I'm doing it. So, can't do this activity, unfortunately. We'll be able to do it in class, though. So if you're in class, hey, good for you. You get to see this. Of course, if you're in class, you've already seen the lecture. You wouldn't be watching the recording unless you were absent, in which case you're not going to be able to see this. Anywho, the point of this activity is that the rules of the game matter, right? And that's what the government provides. The government provides the rules of an economy, okay? So this is a fun auction that I get to have sometimes with students, where we'll start bidding for $1. Okay, we'll be bidding for $1. Okay, so of course the first student bids 50 cents. Why not? Why not pay 50 cents for $1, right? And then another student will bid 55 cents. Now the rules of this auction are that both players have to pay. What's up, Darth? That both players have to pay, right? So then of course the person that's paying 55 cents, they're going to be winning the $1 now. So the person that's paying 50, they have a decision to make. Okay, do they stop playing the game and pay me 50 cents anyways, while the other person pays 55 and gets the $1, or do they one up to 60? Yeah, and in that way they're getting the $1, but the other person now has to pay me 55 cents, and that person that pays 60 gets the $1. So it ends up with them just bidding each other up until eventually we get to the near around the price of $1, and now the person that is bidding 95 cents, they're in the lead. They're going to get the $1. The person that's bidding 90, they have a decision. Do they stop paying? Or do they bid $1 to win $1? Why not? They'd break even. So the person then that is paying 95 cents, they have a decision to make. Do they bid to $1.05? Do they pay $1.05 to get $1? Or do they walk away? So you can see how the rules of the game cause these players to make bad decisions. Yeah, it incentivizes them, or at least gives them an incentive. It may not, they may stop at 50 cents, right? No one may play the game, right? Because one of my favorite pieces of advice is don't play games if you don't want the prizes, or don't play games if it's not a good game to play, right? Don't play bad games, and if you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. Those are two of my favorite things to tell students, okay? So in this case, this would be a game that you don't play, okay? Because the moment you buy in, anyone else can buy in, and you'd be stuck in this tornado of having to make a bad decision or just taking your loss at 50 cents, right? So in the same way that I have set rules that have ended up with a bad scenario occurring, or encouraging bad scenarios to occur where people are paying $1.05 to get $1. Apparently, I've heard of professors that have played this game and had lawyers that would just bicker with each other, and the price of the $1 would end up getting to $20, and it's insane, right? That's not efficient, right? So rules matter. So what rules should the government have? What role should the government be? Should it just be to protect you? Should it be to protect you? Should it be to provide whatever you want? What role should the government have? Okay. Oof. Very interesting. Yeah. And of course, depending on where you are in the political spectrum, okay, you will think that the role of the government is quite different, right? Should the government police morality? Should the government provide goods and services? If they should provide goods and services, what goods and services should they provide? If you're an anarchist, you ask the question, should the government even exist, man? Anyways, today, in this class, we know that government already exists, so really we shouldn't be asking that anarchist question, but what should government be doing, right? Since it's there, since it's such a large part of our lives, what should the role of government be? Well, no matter what the government's going to be doing, the government has people working in it, so it's going to have some costs, and so we have to think, what is the cost of government? And you may be led to just say taxes, and that's true. We do pay taxes for government, yeah, but it's not just taxes. Right? You also have to think, what are those taxes going to? They're going to people that are working jobs, that are working at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles. But the thing is, if those people weren't working at the Bureau of Motor Vehicles, they would be doing other things. There's also an opportunity cost for all of the labor that government takes up. Okay? It takes resources as well to gather taxes. Anyone that we send out to gather taxes, the cost of collecting those taxes, the cost of assessing whether or not those taxes are the right amount gathered, of double checking whether or not someone has paid their taxes, and of course there's the whole bureaucracy where they take taxes from me and then they appropriate it to somebody. Right? There's a cost to doing that. Okay, and everyone that's doing that as well, they also have an opportunity cost, right? All these people could be doing something that's not government related if they weren't working for the government, right? So the cost of government is a lot more than just taxes. Okay, so now that we have the cost of government away, what should the benefit of government be? What should we be using this cost for? What should we be using these taxes and these people for if we have them working in a government? Okay. Well, we'll get to that in a second. Okay, I forgot I had this slide. I had a sick transition to go into this. But how do we know when a government's too big, right? Before we talk about what a government should provide, how big should we have our government be? Yeah, how's that for a question? And how do you even measure how big your government should be? Should you have a big government? Should you have a small government? Again, depends which end of the political spectrum you are, whether or not you should have a big government or a small government. But how do you know whether or not you have a big government or a small government? Yeah. One of the ways that we measure, man, here I am coming from a hick town. Jeez. One of the ways that we measure how big a government is, or how much of the economy is government production, is we just measure, what percentage of GDP is government spending, right? Because if we break up GDP again, we have consumer spending, investment spending, and net exports. We also have government spending, right? So what portion of GDP is government spending? And that will tell us essentially what percentage of our economy is the government. Yeah? Ooh. So if you look at the United States over time, throughout our history, words are fun. Look what's happened since the beginning of the 1900s to today. You can see that government spending has drastically increased, and a lot of that was with the New Deal, right? You see a lot of increase during the New Deal. But that said, it's been still increasing since then, right? It's still been increasing since then. Okay, if you look at the end of the 40s, where we get in 1950, it's still been increasing since 1950, yeah. And you could break up different reasons as to why it's been increasing. Okay, you could point to this area, of course, that it wasn't just the New Deal; it was also a giant war that plagued all of the earth. Yeah, and then ever since then, we've had some other conflicts that have required government spending. Right, America always is able to find itself in some other place of the earth, making sure that we're defending freedom by killing people. And we've also had a lot more programs come out here domestically, right, that we want to provide for people. Okay, so we can see that the size of the government in relation to the economy has grown. Right, the government today is a lot bigger than the government at the turn of the what would that be? 19th century. Yeah, it's certainly at least since the 19th century, right? As we go into the 1800s. And then into the 20th century, into the 1900s, right? GDP has gotten more and more of it taken up by government. So what we're saying by government spending, they're spending that money on producing things, right? So this is how much the government is producing, be it education or buying, like how much they're paying the teachers to educate, how much the government is spending on military personnel, military weapons. I was going to say tools, but who are we kidding? But this is just how much the government spends on things, in the same way that we look at how much the consumer spends on cheeseburgers and skateboards and how much businesses spend on Mack trucks and machines for factories, yeah, and how much we spend on how much foreigners spend on our exports, how much we are producing, right? Because all that spending represents how much is being produced. So we're going to be talking about this throughout this section, but let's talk about this. Should we have the government provide military? Yeah, is that something we should have the government do? Because that's what we're talking about in this section. Should the government provide the military? Yeah, is that something the government should do? Okay, and if you look at America, we've had a different size of our military throughout our history, right? If you look at when we just became a sovereign nation, or a set of sovereign nations, right? When we were under the Articles of Confederation, right? When we were all, more states than we were a country. Our standing army, each state kind of had their own, right? And then some ticked off farmers came along, and we realized that we couldn't cooperate enough, so then we created the Constitution, where we would have a bigger standing army, okay? So in that case, the army's to protect ourselves from people that want to harm the nation as a whole, okay? But historically, if you think about military, what they've been used to do is really been to control their own population, right? Look at Britain with the United States, right? Their military was used to control their colonies. If you look throughout history into older civilizations, your men with swords would be telling your citizens what to do, yeah? But the idea is that they're there to keep order. So should we have the government provide military? We'll talk about that in a later section, okay? I'm just trying to get your brain flowing, yeah? Get your brain flowing with ideas of whether or not the government should provide something, okay? What about schools? Okay? Should the government provide education? Matter of fact, if you look at U.S. history and as for why we have schools, we have schools that it has to do a lot with voting. Yeah, the argument for why we should have public education comes from not it being what we call a public good. We'll talk about what a public good is later in this unit. But people argue that we should have schooling because we have more educated voters. So if we want to have good government, we need to have good schools. That's the argument, at least. Okay. Of course, some people don't like public schools. Yeah, because they feel like they're not good quality. They also may feel like they're brainwashing their kids. Matter of fact, Karl Marx, founder of socialism, right, the thought leader when it came to socialism, communism, and Adam Smith, the one that noted that capitalism is what got people their goods and services, right? Having no government control is what got people the goods and services they need. Both of them argued that the government should provide public school. Okay, Adam Smith argued the top point, that if you want to have an educated populace that will lead to more growth, you should have public schools. Karl Marx argued it for a little bit of a different reason. His idea was that if you were going to be able to control the populace, you'd need to have them being educated by the government, right? If you want people to like the government, you need to have the government educate them. And another point that's brought up, Darth, is absolutely some people that maybe don't have kids don't see the point in public school. And we'll talk about externalities later in this series of part 3 of Common Sense Economics about why even some economists say that even people who don't have kids should still be in support of public schools. Okay, so let's go on. I don't want to be giving an answer here just yet. We'll wait until later in the week, and what I'll say as an economist, right? But what about sports stadiums? Whoa, government provides sports stadiums, right? At least here in the States do. I don't know if that's a thing overseas, Darth. But what about sports stadiums? Should they provide sports stadiums? What do you think? The argument is that, it'll bring jobs. It'll bring jobs. But what do we know about jobs? Right? Darth said in chat that the United States military is the world's largest employer. Yeah? I mean, think about all the people we have in the military. They're employed by the DoD. So the argument for these is similar to that, in that some people argue that we should have a big military because it provides jobs. Some people argue that we should have some local governments pay for sports stadiums because it'll bring jobs. Let's watch what our man with the mustache, John Stossel, has to say. Olympics is something that's similar to this, where some areas will try to get the Olympics brought to them, the idea thinking that it'll boost their economy. Let's watch this video.
Super Bowl moment.
Sunday brings us America's most watched sporting event. Atlanta's politicians are excited.
Hey, this is appropriate.
The world's best
Super Bowl season just started.
to the world's greatest stage to give us what they've got.
And what will Atlanta give?
We'll turn on the lights and put on a show.
And pay for part of that show with their
$700 million for a new NFL stadium.
taxpayers' money. Hundreds of millions of dollars, which they gave to billionaire Arthur Blank, owner of Atlanta's football team, to get him to build this stadium, a showplace that Atlanta's former mayor called.
Simply the best facility in the world.
Do the people of Atlanta at least get a cut of the restaurant and merchandising revenue? No.
Falcons control all the money from parking, restaurants, and merchandising.
Sweet deals like that are not unusual.
12 teams have actually turned a profit on stadium subsidies alone. Yes, they received more money than it cost to build their facilities.
So taxpayers, most of whom never attend a game, subsidize billionaires.
So the question is then, why should taxpayers have to give? Why would the government want to give these business owners that own these team franchises? Why would they want to give them money if the sports stadiums are going to turn a profit anyways? The truth is that they don't know whether or not it's going to turn a profit, right? It's risky, yeah. So they have the government try to help them mitigate that risk.
There. Seems like a scam to me. I don't fault Arthur Blank for grabbing the money. I even like the guy. Blank improved our lives by founding Home Depot. We're both stutterers. Here we are posing with actress Emily Blunt at a stuttering charity event.
Do all stutterers have a mustache? Is that a thing? I don't know.
If politicians are giving
Because I stutter, but I don't have a mustache. I have a beard. I guess a mustache is included in one, but I don't know.
money away, Blank's partners would consider him irresponsible not to take it. The problem is the politicians giving away your money. I get why they do it. They like going to games, like telling voters, I brought a team to our town. Here's the mayor of Las Vegas.
We are so ready for Major League sports in this town.
She and her political buddies funneled $700 million tax dollars to the owners of the Oakland Raiders to get them to move the Raiders to Vegas. Watch the politicians applaud themselves while the governor signs the bills. I'm glad this reporter put this question to the mayor.
Why should there be 1 cent of public money when you have 2 guys who could pay for this themselves?
I think it really is a benefit to us that really could spill over into something.
Spill over into something? Politicians always claim giving taxpayer money to rich team owners will spill over to everybody.
8 months, what do you think, guys?
And yes, the well-connected people who pose with the shovels at groundbreaking ceremonies do collect some of what's spilled.
She's not good at carrying
But the
that
way
dirt
they
in that shovel.
justify the cost to taxpayers is bunk.
This was a terrific investment.
They always call stadium subsidies good investments, but it's not a good investment. It's a bad one. Politicians, teams, and stadium promoters all highlight this extra business activity that occurs when the football team plays at home. But this
Are all football games played at home?
happens fewer than a dozen days a year. The stadium's also used for some concerts and soccer games, but most days, not much happens here. Economists who study stadium subsidies say little or none of the money makes it back to taxpayers. The problem is the seen versus the unseen. We see the people at the game.
Remember when we were talking in an earlier part of this class, right? Well, who he's quoting here is Bastiat, right? We see all these people coming in, right? When the stadium is live, man, do we see it? You don't see it when it's empty. You also don't see that all of this money that is going to build this stadium, where we'll have these jobs for 12 days a year, all of that money is now not going into other areas that would have existed if this stadium didn't exist, where there would be jobs, right?
Games and extra customers at some businesses on game day. Stadium promoters show us this, but looking at this means we miss the unseen cost.
The unseen cost is that those people would otherwise be spending their money elsewhere in the local communities. At the local bar, there's one less bartender. There was
I'm a public school teacher, so bars are bad, okay?
one less waitress hired at another restaurant. A movie theater that had one less theater full.
Right. 1,000 little cuts. But those ordinary businesses don't have the clout that the big boys have.
Welcome to Super Bowl 53.
So Sunday, when Atlanta politicians brag about their stadium.
We are Atlanta.
And clueless media claim this created jobs.
4,000 jobs created to do this.
Let's also remember all the jobs they destroyed and the taxpayer money they squandered.
And I'm curious if that news story was talking about jobs being created. Yeah. Was that just 4,000 jobs to create the dang thing? Because then those jobs were lost the moment that it was already created. And are those jobs year-round, those 4,000 jobs? I want to doubt that. Okay. So, should the government provide sports stadiums? We won't talk about it anymore, but I lean close to what our boy Stassi here is saying. Okay? Whoa. How did I do that? I boomered my way 5 slides back. Jeez. So what should government do then? What do we know government should do? Well, in an earlier section in this class, we said that private property rights needed to be protected and that enforcement of contracts needs to occur in an even-handed manner. Yeah, and that will enable us, when people are able to, keep what's theirs, they'll be incentivized to produce more of it, right? When they don't have to worry about protecting their property, they'll be able to spend those resources producing other things, yeah? So we already know that the government should do this, okay? So if we look back to our founding fathers and what they thought government should be, we'll also look at some other people throughout history. They have some pretty decent quotes, okay? We have Thomas Jefferson saying that he would like a wise and frugal government, which shall restrain men from injuring one another, which shall leave them otherwise free to regulate their pursuits of industry and improvements, and shall not take from the mouth of labor the bread it has earned. This is the sum of good government, right? That was in our founding fathers' heads, right? Especially him as a person that was, against the Federalists, right? Against us having a bigger government, yeah? So we have this idea that for T. Jeffy, what he wanted to have was a smallest government, right? Easy taxes, minimal involvement, let the people themselves rule their lives. Adam Smith, similar, right? As he's observing the world, as he's observing the world during the 18th century, he writes, little else is requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, and a tolerable administration of justice. That tolerable administration of justice probably has something to do with just protecting easy property rights, right? Probably the same thing with peace, right? Easy taxes. Again, small government, right? That's when we were founding our country. This is what we had in mind, right? I realized that, Darth, as I was saying, I was like, I really should be doing a Scottish accent. Little else is requisite to carry a state to the highest degree of opulence from the lowest barbarism, but peace, easy taxes, in the tolerable administration of justice. More modern takes could be Thomas Sowell. Soul. That's what my heart says. Soul. Yeah. Anyways, there's been a push for people to kind of like just throw government under the bus from an economic standpoint. But he's an economist, and he's saying that the rules matter, right? And we need something to set up those rules, right? So even in a market economy, even where we want there to be as little government as possible, the government still performs a very, very special role. Yeah, it's not just about having low taxes and protecting property rights. It's not just about allowing men to do their own thing, man. It's about setting up rules. He says a modern market economy cannot exist in a vacuum. It can't exist on its own. Market transactions take place within a framework of rules and requires someone with the authority to enforce those rules. Okay? So this is what we call government's protective function. This is what Thomas Sowell's talking about. Okay, that framework of rules, being able to protect individuals. You'll notice here they all kind of reference this: peace, tolerable administration of justice, restrain men from injuring one another. This is government's protective function. Okay, government has to maintain a framework for security and order. Government has to protect individuals' private property rights, okay? And this will enable us to trade. So the first function of government is to protect the individuals in the economy, and that will enable us to grow more, okay? Notably here, guys, the government is protecting people's rights, okay? The government is not giving the people the rights. The idea here is that the people have these rights already, right? This is something that is insanely American, right? We are not given rights by the government, but we are endowed with inalienable rights from our Creator. Yeah, and it's not just protecting people's rights, but it's also making sure that contracts are enforced in an even-handed manner, right? It's not arbitrary. It's not the government picking and choosing who they're going to, is the government going to side with A or B in a contract? No, it's the government is going to uphold this contract. They're not going to try to agree with one party or the other. And something that you could criticize if you want to, what makes them the only person that can do this is because they have what we call a monopoly on violence. When you think about who is the only, and we've kind of seen this challenged recently in America with movements against police brutality, but the only party in the United States that can kill somebody legally is the U.S. government. The only person that can, force people to do things is the government, right? If I don't pay my taxes, they show up with guns. Yeah. If someone hurts me, I can call the police and they can handle it. Or if I do it myself, then I have to go to court, right? Thankfully, there's been a movement for now even police officers have to go to court. Whether or not it's effective is up for debate, and I don't want to get into that because this is an econ class. But government has a monopoly use on violence, and this enables them to maintain security and order. Or I guess I shouldn't mean it allows them to maintain that framework of security and order. It makes it easier for them to do so. But of course, that's another cost, right? We talked all the way back at the beginning of this lecture about what is the cost of government. It's not just taxes; it's also that we're giving this third party the ability to have this monopoly on violence, okay? So, there's going to be some other things that we talk about as we get later into this section. How am I doing on time? Okay, not too bad. Where there may be some things that we don't want that we don't want to rely on the free market to provide, right? So, what if we had the government provide goods and services, right? So we talked about the government. Okay, we need the government to protect individuals, but what about providing things like, I don't know, firefighting services? Oh, Grandma's saying 200 pounds.
Anyone else? Go! 210!
So, are there some things that we want to be provided regardless of what the cost is? Yeah. Do we want markets to solve all problems? Yeah, that's a question we have to ask. So, Alexander Hamilton has a great quote in that if all men were angels, no government would be necessary. But the truth is, guys, no one's an angel. No one's perfect. Because of this, there's going to be individuals that are going to try to exploit others, that are going to try to abuse others' private property rights. So because of that, our founding fathers and economists today, most economists today, agree that we need a government in order to have our private property rights protected. Okay? And yeah, the idea is that publicly funded services, they aren't prioritizing profit, right? They are prioritizing the good being provided. So in this case, this private firefighting service, they're prioritizing profit, whereas the government, the public service would be prioritizing the provision of the good or service, right? And we want to make a very clear distinction between public goods and private goods once we get to a later lecture in this section. Okay, I think it'll be the next section 2, or it'll be section 3. In any case, how much government should we have, right? Because it's not a debate of all or nothing, right? It's not, well, I don't know. There's been a push for communism recently, which is really alarming that we haven't learned our lesson as humanity yet. Right? Communism being that the government should provide everything. But I should say, for most people that are educated, it's not a debate between having no government or having everything provided by government, right? It's how much government should we have. So I really like this clip by SNL. I don't want to show it because I will get this video copyright strike, and I want it to be easy for my students to watch this video. But please watch this video on your own to get an idea of how many rules, how much should the government be deciding how our lives are going to roll. So we have Will Ferrell here. He just wants to get in the jacuzzi. Jim Carrey shows up and he's telling him, to be careful, don't get yourself hurt. This guy comes in, he swims laps, and it's a Jim Carrey character, so it's hilarious and over the top, right? And eventually, like, he gets a cramp in his foot, so then Jim Carrey steps on him. What's up, Stalin? Jim Carrey jumps in to save him, and then he gives him mouth to mouth. It is a hilarious clip. Please do yourself a favor and watch it. Jim Carrey I don't care for much today. I think he's gotten much less funny as he's focused on being more political. But this is from Jim Carrey's prime, okay? So let's ask another question that we're going to answer in another lecture. When should the government provide something, right? When should the government provide something? Is it when people want it? People, want healthcare. Should the government provide it? People want education, and the government provides it. People want police and / don't want police, depending on which side of the political spectrum you are, and the government provides it, right? Should they provide it in the event of a crisis? In the event of a crisis, how much should the government provide? Should the government provide all of it? When no one can provide something, does that mean the government should provide it, right? I want to have... I want to be able to travel to space, to Mars. Should the government provide it? I want to be able to have a little like Matrix thing in the back of my head that I can just plug in and then just play video games and virtual reality, but in my brain. Does that mean the government should provide it? What should and when should the government help? When should the government provide something? Yeah. Really, what it's going to come down to is whether or not something is classified as what we call a public good, which we will talk about, in the coming sections of this part. So, for now, I will leave you to be frothing at the mouth for section 2, and we will talk about it in the next section. Thank you for watching. I'll see you. Anyways,